Today, I am calling an emergency meeting on cybersecurity because Make Sense has yet to seriously cover the topic. Oh my God, what am I doing? Episode 58, and we haven't even talked about cybersecurity. What do we all need to keep in mind the next time we get notified our data has been hacked? That's why I have with me this week Jumoke Data. She is a technologist with 15 years of experience across the technology sector, including cybersecurity. Jumoke also founded the Tech Women Network, a global community and career development platform for diverse technical women, and created Hugh Tech Summit, the first national conference for women of color technologists. She's a personal friend of mine, and I am excited to have her. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. There are many. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts. God knows I switch my social media every week on and off my phone. I'm here with my guest to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay, the Lady Engineer. I am a pragmatic futurist and human-first technologist, serial entrepreneur, and innovation consultant. If you're new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's make sense of cybersecurity. Jumoke, how you doing?
Hi, Lindsay. Pretty good. I'm excited. This is long overdue.
Long
Long
overdue.
overdue, yeah.
So let's start with our first segment, Crystal Ball. What does the future hold? This is where I call out interesting predictions for this year, and the experts, my guests, they just tell us their hot take. I'm gonna fire off some predictions, and Jumike, I want you to say, yes, that's happening, no, that's not happening, and maybe any added information.
Okay.
So, first up, this trend was in CIO.com. It said the democratization of technology. So, next gen technology like no code design studios will enable non professionals to engage in fraud detection or sales forecasting and customer experience improvements more efficiently and with less risk. Is this happening? Can non technical professionals engage in fraud detection and other cybersecurity issues?
Definitely. So the answer, yes. And definitely, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for non-technical people. I honestly, personally think a lot of the solutions that we have today have come from people. A lot of the technology solutions that we have today have actually come from people that are non-technical, that just see a problem and a need to come up with a solution. So yeah, with detection, with fraud detection, and other topics and other issues, definitely, because it's often I'll say laymen or civilians or people that are consumers that are hit by these issues and these matters. So yes.
It would be great to offload some of the work of corporate IT departments onto other departments and professionals. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to this. All right. The
Mhm.
next one is better AI guardrails and encryption for customer data. So companies must adopt new strategies for data collection,
Yeah.
emphasizing encryption and transparency while navigating privacy regulations. So this is saying that companies will prioritize secure data storage and compliance to maintain consumer trust amidst evolving privacy concerns. Is this happening?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot happening with privacy right now, with like different policies, and I know policy to everyday people is just not of interest, but it's really important to start paying attention to those policies on all of these websites and these apps and other things that we're using, the small fine print, because there's a lot of conversation happening around privacy and data. There's a number of laws, even with children. There's something called COPPA, with medicine. We have HIPAA with there's a, I don't want to mispronounce it, but there's a the Grime Leach Bliley Act that's in finance, or I may be mixing it up, but
That's okay.
there's a lot happening with privacy, and there's a lot of laws in place, but there aren't as many national laws that as there should be. California has actually been leading the pack. California and some other states too, like Utah and a few others that have been leading with their privacy laws and regulations at the state level, but there's still a lot of work to do at the federal level.
Yeah, I've gotten the impression that Europe is really leading the way on data
Yeah,
privacy. GDPR is what brought
GDPR.
about the cookies notification we all see whenever we go to a
Yeah,
website. That was largely driven by European regulation and
yeah.
not as much US. I had one recent guest who said, nope, companies are going to still do just like the bare minimum. And another guest that was like, yes, things are happening in this area. So I'm going to take you as a tiebreaker and say, yes, things are happening in this area. Companies are taking secure data storage and compliance more seriously. And hopefully that will mean less data breaches and hacks. We'll also talk about the national level regulation in a little bit later in this episode. All right, so last one, Jumake, doubling down on cybersecurity. So we are in a cybersecurity pandemic, and CIOs must focus on cyber preparedness to prevent attacks. Yet, investing in cyber recovery is often overlooked. Lacking proper tools and processes can be disastrous. It's kind of an extension of the one we just went over, but do you see? I know you're in school right now, so you might not be
Yeah.
in corporate institutions, but do you see a trend towards people doubling down on cybersecurity? Or would you agree with the description of a cybersecurity pandemic?
There's a little bit of both happening, but I do think that there is definitely a rise in the focus on cybersecurity. I know that there's even mergers. So my background and experience, I primarily worked in like corporate IT departments, and I learned as of late that security wasn't part of it as far as my experiences. But what I've learned as of late is that there are mergers happening whereas there's been security teams and other IT teams, but now there's actually the merging of the two, whereas they have been often separate. So I
Mhm.
do think that there is a bit of a pandemic, as you put it, happening, and it has to happen because of just the number of attacks that's happening more regularly, um, all of the growing needs in the space, all of the needs for us to educate the employees and
Mhm.
civilians about what's happening. So I think it's a little bit of both happening, but definitely more on the emphasis of prioritizing it within enterprises.
Yeah, I think that, an observation that I'm sure you've seen too, and I've seen across startups is that we're really bad at learning from other people's failures. We have to have our own failure for, to really get the point. Um, And so, uh, like keep seeing companies getting hit by these data breaches and cybersecurity attacks, and we're like, when are they going to learn their lesson? But it's like each one is learning their lesson and then now
Yeah.
taking it seriously.
Yeah, and also this big push now for something called like security by design, where there's basically encouragement for people to start from the beginning when you're building these apps and when you're building these new technologies to build it with security in mind, whereas there wasn't as much emphasis on that before.
Mm,
Yeah.
I get it. I one of the topics I spoke about recently with another guest was how, marketing departments tend to want to collect as much data as possible.
Mhm. Yeah.
So organizations are sitting on more data than they actually comprehend. It's like
Yep.
a back, almost looking around your room and saying, wow, I have all these like started projects that I haven't finished. And it starts to
Mhm.
become a liability because we're stressed out seeing all these projects. It's the same with the data. Marketing people collect all of this data. IT doesn't have the time to process it all, comprehend it, put it to good use.
Yep.
And then we're sitting on all this data, and for a company, it becomes a liability to have all of that data, especially if they're not putting it to any good use or have security around it. So I do love the idea of when we're rolling out marketing or product driven user interfaces that may collect data. Like, let's really think about security first and not ask customers for data we don't have a way of processing.
And storing, because that's the other thing too, is that you have all this data, but it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a lot of light bulbs, or like uh, moments where people are realizing that cloud doesn't mean less expensive. It doesn't necessarily, because you're getting rid of like storage in the old sense, clients and
Right.
servers, etc. But
You're not
right,
housing the data
housing the
servers
physical
yourself,
system. Right,
but someone is, and that
someone
costs
is.
money.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And on top of that, a lot of people don't know this, but a regular algorithm compared to an AI machine learning algorithm uses 5 times the amount of electricity to operate as like a regular simple kind of if then else while loop that we might
Else.
design. Which is crazy too. So that is extremely expensive too. And the more data, AI needs a ton of data. So it's like sitting on a ton of data and it needs a ton of electricity. So it's really expensive. So why don't we
Yep.
stop collecting so much that we don't use? Sounds
Yep.
like a good idea to me.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. So moving into our second segment, what do you know? This is where us relatively intelligent tech ecosystem insiders discuss some hot mess or some trending item in the news. We don't claim to be the most expert on it, but we definitely know more than you do. So this isn't too much of a hot mess. It's just a news item. So, the Office of the National Cyber Director at the White House released a 2024 report on the cybersecurity posture of the United States. For me, I had no idea there was a National Cyber Director. So,
Yep.
I want to use this headline just to talk broadly about the cybersecurity field, not necessarily what exactly is in that document. So, one, did you know that there was a National Cyber Director at the White House?
I did, and actually, I actually know quite a few people that work there. But yeah, I learned of it. So just, for your audience. So I'm, as Lindsay mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm currently a graduate student pursuing my master's in cybersecurity, and I recently worked on some projects that exposed me to a lot of the initiatives that are happening in the cybersecurity field. Um, and I Part of that was learning about this the Office of the National Cybersecurity Director, and the report that came out in 2023, and the most recent report has just been eye-opening in terms of how much needs to be done, how much we're tackling, and how much more still needs to be done in the nation. But yes, to answer your question, I was aware.
To clarify and give yourself some credit, you are in school, but you were working in cybersecurity and attracting diverse talent to cybersecurity before that, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so you
Yeah.
still know more than most of us.
Okay.
So you still know more than most of us. Um, why do we need a national cybersecurity director? What seems to be the value that they bring to our country to and to us individually?
Well, we need that office for a number of reasons. One, to just kind of keep a bird's eye view on cyber. It's not something that everyone is thinking about. We hear about it more when there's like a ransomware attack, and that's when people's ears may perk up, like, oh, what's going to happen with my data, or something else. But other than that, it may not be something that people typically pay attention to. So long and short of it, we need that bird's eye view on what's happening in the cybersecurity space in the nation and around the world. Why? Because we need to protect ourselves. We need to be on defense as well as offense at times with enemies. I don't think that everyday people are aware of just how many attacks we're under every day, every second. There are cyber attacks happening in some way, shape, or form, and it's everything from our infrastructures, our main infrastructure. Think water, think bridges, think electrical grids, to our hospitals and our schools. So we need that high level office and that leadership to, again, make plans, create strategies, come up with solutions, um, keep us informed about what's happening and across the nation and again around the world, and ultimately to encourage us to be more aware of uh, cyber attacks, opportunities in the cyberspace, and more.
Yeah. I think that, like we mentioned, that uh, in the US, at least, our federal government is really lacking on technology policy as a whole. We just are very always lagging technology, and Silicon Valley moves so fast. And our legislators are not technologists; they're not keeping up with the Joneses here. So having a national cyber director in the White House provides some federal level guidance while individual states are figuring it out and individual departments within the federal government are figuring out how to set their own priorities too. Would you say that that's correct? It's kind of in place of having real federal legislation, at least here's some guidance or beacon to help lead the way.
Definitely. And then I think you kind of touched on it too. There's also the relationship between the private sector and the public sector, like the enterprise, the companies, et cetera, nonprofit agencies. Like there is this space kind of serves as somewhat of a command central in some ways for all the issues.
Mm. So you've spent the past 3 years working in the overall field of cybersecurity. For us outsiders, and hearing, man, like all of our different infrastructure is under attack all the time. We have no idea. What is what are the US's kind of biggest strengths? Like, is it a good thing that we don't have any idea that these are all happening because we're on top of it, or what?
Well, I think there's some things I can speak to and some I can't, but I think that the U.S. is doing a great job overall of trying to get in front of what's to come. And as far as like educating uh, us about the need for more people to work in the field because of like the opportunities, I think there's also a lot of support for people who want to. Uh, get educated or trained to work in the field. I think there's also work that's being done to kind of, I don't want to say convert, but that we have our military and people that were veterans that are, or people that have served that are now looking for their second careers and providing pathways for them as well. So I
Mm,
think a number of things in terms of the office and strategy, again, opportunities to sharing opportunities to break into the space, get trained to work in the space, and ultimately just their intel. I think that the U.S. Again, I can't speak to that. I don't work in that capacity, but from what I've seen and what I've learned so far, just getting intel in terms of what is happening around the world in terms of cyber.
mm. I like that idea actually in preparing for this episode and another episode that I am recording this week where we'll hit on TikTok a little later. But, West Point Academy, their website has a the new frontier of defense kind of section, and it's all about digital defense of the nation. And I really like that idea of connecting veterans who maybe fought on the physical front line to fighting on the digital front line as well. That's really, really cool. Do you think that we have any oversights or weaknesses? Like what, the US is kind of behind on their privacy regulations compared to Europe. Are there any like weaknesses that we need to patch up and get better at?
Yeah, there's a few. I think definitely we need. I touched on this briefly, but we definitely need more people. We need more
Hmm.
people to work in the field and transition into the field. I shared at one point that I think retired police officers would be a great uh, pipeline to kind of look into for potential talent.
Hmm.
The retirement age may vary, but there are times when they are looking for second careers, and there's opportunities. There's like digital forensics. There's a number of things I think that could overlap between crime fighting on land, so to speak, and then in the digital space. So we definitely need more talent. So talent is one place that we could use improvement. I think diversity is another place, another area that is needed. There's just a need for more diverse perspectives in the field. It's kind of like if you're fighting different people that have different mindsets or different these threat actors, so to speak. Like you need people that think differently. Like you don't need groupthink. You need people that have uh, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, different ways of solving problems, different ways of navigating to really fortify defenses. So I think having more diversity and diverse perspectives is another space. And then if I would say, I think I there's a few. Sometimes I think too much gets shared in the media. I'm not sure if this is a good thing, but I think that sometimes there's like gaps and vulnerabilities are just out there. Sometimes like, oh, this XYZ, is vulnerable and it's just shared. So I just think that sometimes there just needs to be more of a balance in terms of what is shared. I understand the need to kind of notify the general public about what's happening, but then there are times when I'm just looking, I'm like, I don't think that should be public knowledge because the same way we're watching, enemies are watching as well.
Interesting, right? So if we talk about the like, oh, this company was breached, and we give some of the details of how or where in their system they were breached, it just informs hackers what worked,
Yeah, or
right?
even yeah, even saying simple things as like, oh, there aren't enough. XYZ workers in this space. Like that just shows that there's a gap or that there's a lack of resources somewhere or that, sometimes I just think that there is just too much information public, but I understand the need. Like there just needs to be a balance of how much is shared for our safety.
Yeah, I get that. So
Mhm.
for those of us, I probably in the last month or two got a letter in the mail saying my information had been hacked and they were supplying me, free credit reporting for the next, I don't know, year or two.
Yeah.
If we get that letter or email, how seriously should we be taking it? And I think that there's like some immunity that is developing amongst people that are like, my data's already out there. What can I do?
Yeah, I think you should always take it seriously, but I also think, don't click on anything,
Yeah.
and we have to like it's just sad that we're even in these times, but we also have to like educate like our elders, like our parents, like
Mhm.
don't because unfortunately they're being targeted too. So yes, you should take it seriously, but I think what I would share is that, if something is suspicious, you don't click attachments, don't click on links. I know people we hear this, but you'd be surprised how many people still do this because they play on familiarity and they use names or faces and now we have so much happening with AI, but they use who they use those uh, names to fish you,
Mhm.
or to try to get information from you. So I always share that, always call the place directly. If you get a letter from XYZ company and it looks suspicious, or you never signed up for that thing, or there's an attachment, click this, and, or someone's asking you for personal information, just don't do it. Like call, if you have any questions, if you can go to the XYZ company, the office, depending on what it is, go. But call the published public number and try to speak with someone.
Now, is that different from a letter in the mail versus an email? So, like, email for sure. Don't click the attachment. Someone's
Yeah.
like, here's your invoice. And you're like, I am not expecting an invoice from any service provider. This is not something I should select. I totally get that in email. But if I get a letter in the mail from a company, is that more trustworthy?
No, because they're
No.
scamming they're scamming in so many different ways. It's just not just email, it's phone, there's text. There was recently like some things happening on WhatsApp. There's letters, people are, using letterhead and mailing off letters to senior citizens, saying that, hey, XYZ, maybe for something for your mortgage or maybe something for life insurance, or you didn't pay this bill, things that can cause them to kind of panic and get nervous, where they may call that number on that letter, which is not a legitimate number. It's not a
Right.
legitimate place, and share personal information just out of fear. So
Yeah.
yes, whether it's a letter, an email, a phone call, a text message, you have to question everything.
Question everything. Be on your guard. Athletic stance, on your toes, ready to
Oh,
go.
trust. Yes.
Uh, I know Google Chrome has built into it. You can search a list of your passwords that have been compromised. Is that something we should all put on our to-do list for, the month of June or whenever cybersecurity month is, or it's now a priority as a weekend task to reset all those passwords?
Definitely. I think whether it needs to be a family activity or, something that you do kind of in line with your New Year resolution, or whatever you do at the new year or the end of the year, it definitely should start to become best practice to change your passwords. Also, saving them in a secure place. There's a ton of different apps to help keep your password or save your password.
Yeah.
People are still
I
using everything from spreadsheets to, notepads. But yeah, password protection and changing should definitely become normal activity for everyone.
I've been using one password for a few years. And I will admit, even though I am a tech forward person, I didn't adopt it till much later. Um, but it has, I will happily endorse it. And if anyone that works for One Password wants to sponsor an episode of this podcast, give me a call.
That's
But
right.
yeah, I love One Password. It's great. It's on my phone, just like entering a password that Apple might store. You can set it to use One Password to store your passwords. But Junke, we might have like a shared marketing campaign that we can collaborate on,
Hmm.
like change your password day, and we can have a co-working session and people can come and just change their passwords and hang out with us.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. Like I through the Tech Women Network for a couple years, I was hosting a device cleanup party, just encouraging people. Like people are having vision parties and all kinds of things, but just clean up your devices, photos, bookmarks, passwords, whatever it is. Like just go through your computer devices, your laptops, tablets, everything, and clean them up. Like get rid of
Yeah.
files, organize your photos, everything. So yeah, I'm in.
All right. We're going to put a pin in this idea. We're going to look up when Cybersecurity Awareness Month is. And
October.
then it's October.
It's
Okay, so
October.
now we're
Yeah,
actually going to plan it. It's your birthday, it's my birthday. It
it
could be a
is.
really kinky birthday party. Everyone comes and we're going to change our passwords. We're going to
Yeah.
look at all of the ones that Google says are compromised, prioritize those first. And I think you are reminding me that at some point I started to work on a workbook, developing a
Hmm.
workbook guide about cleaning up your digital life, like
Yeah,
organizing your files, getting into an inbox zero practice. So, all right, I'm getting geeky and nerdy, so I'm going to put a
I
pin in
love
that.
it. I love it.
Okay. There's some other kind of cybersecurity 101 topics. Antivirus software. To be honest, ever since I switched to Mac, I don't hear about antivirus software. It seems to only be a thing on Windows these days. Is
Yeah.
it a thing? Is it a thing we need?
You need it, and yeah, I go between both, but I think I agree that it's heavily pushed more for PCs, the Windows environment, and for Mac they tend to have a lot built in. But yeah, it is a thing. It's still important to have that protection on all of your devices.
And is it a thing like, a home security system where someone's like, I live in a safe neighborhood. I don't do any risky things. I don't need a home security system. Or is it more
Yeah,
serious than more like
yeah,
an
you
auto
don't need
insurance
it.
policy?
You don't need it until you need it. You don't need
Yeah.
you feel like you don't
So it's
need it
more like
until something
insurance.
happens. Yeah, people don't feel like they need things until something happens, like,
Yeah,
oh, I should have been protected, or oh, I shouldn't have, you know, done XYZ. But yeah, you need it. What's the that term? Prevention is better than cure. It's better to be safe than sorry, to just
right.
take the precautions up front.
Okay. Last thing, it's just kind of something random I thought about, but I started recently, not recently, actually 2, 3 years ago. Whenever anything asks me for a phone number online, I enter my Google Voice number instead of my
Mm.
personal phone number. Is that is that like cybersecurity 201, like protecting your digital identity, or is that something that should be taught in the 101 class?
Yeah, I'm with you with that. I do the same thing. I think which class, I don't know, but it needs to be taught.
Yeah,
I've encouraged a number of people just personally just to get that second, that type of voice number just to use like publicly. But I
Mhm,
think so. I think so. I think people should just be cautious with how much they share. I think, keeping your data private, even with financial transactions, like, which card you use on certain websites and, what it's tied to. Like you have all these like cash, apps now, right? Tied to people's bank accounts. And, there's been issues with some of them. So I just
mhm.
think that across the board, whether it's a phone number or it's a credit card, definitely there's other services too. Like you have like PayPal and all these other alternatives to pay for services. You should begin to utilize that as opposed to like using your direct banking card on website.
Yeah, so I know Capital One has a a Chrome plugin where when it notices
Hmm.
you're on a shopping website, it can offer to spin up a virtual card number, and you can actually set a expiration date. So if you're buying something on Amazon, you use the that credit card number. Maybe that credit card number can only be used on Amazon. So if that number gets hacked and is used elsewhere, it can't be used. Or you set an expiration for a week from now or tomorrow so that that number can never be used anywhere after that. So that's a really cool, easy way to protect your credit card online. Do you think when websites prompt you to store your credit card, we should not do that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I understand the ease that, with that storing passwords, storing credit card numbers, but I just think the more that you can keep uh offline, the better, and saving,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So So to just go back to the phone number thing for anyone listening that would like to up level on their data, digital identity protection, if you have a Gmail account, you can go to voice.google. And here's another plug for Google Voice. I will advertise for you too. Um, Go to voice.google and set up a phone number. You can set up any phone number you want and use that. A lot of services that require two-factor authentication, like we'll text you a code to our phone number, to a phone number. You can use it for that. If you're filling out a survey, if you're filling out any other customer feedback form, and you just don't want your personal phone number floating around, use your Google Voice number. There are a few savvy websites with the two-factor authentication that can detect that it's a Google Voice number and not a real number associated with your, AT&T or Verizon account. But just even if 50% of the time you have to enter a phone number, you're entering a Google Voice number, it helps to confuse the bots about your digital identity.
Correct. And then there are similar things that can be done with emails too. Like there are aliases. People can have email aliases as well.
Mm.
So I just want to tie that in there.
Yeah, there is a with Fastmail. I use Fastmail. Fastmail has an integration with 1Password. So just as you can spin up a unique password for every website, you can also spin up a unique masked email for every website. And so if you use both of those services, you can start to amass a really funny list of random email addresses that are associated with each e-commerce website or each newsletter that you sign up for. And if you ever have problems unsubscribing and it's just getting annoying to get emails from this same entity, you can just turn that email, that masked email, that alias email off
Oh.
and just stop it all together, which is really, really nice as well. So, again, another way that you can confuse the
Hmm.
bots about who you are and how to identify you. Any other kind of 101, 201 advice?
I think also there should, there's a lot happening with our home devices, IoT, like,
Mm,
there's security that needs to um happen there can be applied there. I really recently read something about hack. Actually, it was one of the hotels in Las Vegas. They had a breach, a cyber breach, but it actually ended up impacting their networks, but also the doors. You know, the doors that they have the digital doors. And I read somewhere about a home lock. You know, people are moving to the electronic locks as opposed to key locks. That there was a breach of some sort with those home locks. So I just think being more mindful with the devices that you choose and how you use it and how much information you share across them is important to start paying attention to as well.
Here's a question for you, Chumake. What IoT devices do you have in your house? Do you have a Ring? Do you have a Echo or Alexa or anything like that?
I have everything. I don't use any of them.
Okay. I'm
I have
surprised
everything.
that you have them.
Yeah, I have them. Some were gifts and some were, yeah, gifts. I don't use it. I don't use it. Like I don't use Alexa. I don't use any of them. Any of them are smart. Yeah, I don't.
And is that just because you don't like them, or is there something else?
It's a combination. It's been a combination of things. Some things I don't like, and some things I for me personally, it's been better to just kind of stick with uh keeping some things manually. Yeah.
Okay. I want to tell an anecdotal story to drive this home to my audience.
Okay.
Back in 2022, I was doing work with Techstars, the startup accelerator, and I was scouting startups and evaluating startups that were applying for the cohort that year. And one of the startups was working on what's called edge computing and cybersecurity. When we talk about the edge, it's kind of confusing. It sounds intimidating, but we're just talking about all those devices I just mentioned because they're on the edge of the network, right? You seemingly like your Ring is just communicating between your doorbell with your router and then your router with the cloud app, whatever. The connection between the Ring and your Wi-Fi router is not very secure, right? This startup in 2022 is just getting off the ground, right? Pre-seed, hardly raised any money, and that is the problem they are addressing. So when you think about acquiring a Ring or a digital lock, or even I saw like a remote bathtub starter. Like, I don't know why you need that, but a remote bathtub starter. All of these things are things that could be hacked, right? Could be hacked and your data taken, or could be hacked so that they are now under your control. And let's just go back to what I said earlier, which is we have a real serious problem. We don't learn from other people's failures and problems. We wait till we experience it ourselves. I don't want anyone to like flood their house because someone hacked their remote bathtub starter. Like a friend of mine has like a remote garage opener, right? But like someone can come in your house if if you aren't paying attention. So
Right, and we don't wanna make people paranoid paranoid,
no.
but you just need to be more aware, and how much you're sharing and how much like, something is listening, just people really just aren't mindful. Yeah,
Yeah, I think some people are aware and then don't really care because they can't
that's
perceive the
true,
consequences.
that's
Other
true.
people aren't aware, which is why I'm just sharing with you, just for like relevance, that a startup in 2022 is just working on solving this security issue on the edge.
Yeah.
So you do with that what you would like. You know, if you like talking to Alexa, I'm not going to get between you and Alexa, okay?
Yeah, what right,
All
right.
right. Final segment, GMK. From disruptive to disastrous. In this segment, my guest and I talk about when a technology might backfire. So something that is in all the headlines is the case for banning kids from social media and US Congress's work to ban TikTok. It's been a huge topic of late. In March, some legislation was passed. It's now in the courts as TikTok kind of pushes back against it. I would just like love to talk about the data security threat. I feel like lots of people are just on the topic. You
Hmm.
know, we have
Yeah.
friends that continue to use TikTok even though we've been like, hey, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So like maybe can you give us like why is the government why are they so obsessed with TikTok? Like what is the specific deal with it that we should know about?
Yeah, I think at a high level comes down to like spying and accessing data. That's just really the crux of the matter and how this data will be used. I think it touches on everything we just talked about with like devices and privacy and like how data is stored and how it can be used in the future. So I think there's a number of things that make the app a compromise, and that's what they're essentially trying to address. How what's the data that's being accessed, how it's being stored, where how it'll be used, but essentially data access and spying. So that's the
Mm,
biggie. But the users. Again, everyone is not paying attention to cybersecurity. Everybody's not paying attention to what's happening until something happens to you. But there's a number of users that on the platform, like you said, we know a few people that are using the platform, and it's an income generator for a number of people. So uh, that's what makes it, you know, challenging. And it's just pure entertainment, for others if you're not a content provider. But we really need to start getting more serious. I've had the app. I have an account, but I've uninstalled it. I just have a thing. I just get my handle for everything that comes out, but I don't use it because of a number of the privacy issues. And people will argue, well, there's privacy issues with a number of apps. There's privacy issues with our
well,
phone.
that's my next question. Like
Yeah,
other big companies, Meta, Microsoft, Google, they collect a lot of user data.
yeah.
Is TikTok being treated unfairly?
They've also faced their fair share of issues. Like I just wrapped up this a privacy class, quite frankly, and an enterprise cyber class, and in both I learned about some of what Meta has had to deal with, and pay out for different violations with privacy and different policies, etc. So I think TikTok is the hot app right now, and it's in the media, but they're all getting addressed in some way, shape, or form, and many of them have already paid out a lot of money in fines.
Right. I am thinking about, I think that the difference is that those companies are all owned by American entities, whereas TikTok is a Chinese entity.
Yeah, yeah, but there are some that are also owned by others, people from other countries.
Mhm.
But I think, well, we know that there's definitely conflict with China, so I mean that's known. But we also are partners with them in a number of ways when it comes to like e-commerce and the chain supply in a lot of ways. So it's just a complex matter. But
Mhm.
to say that it's unfair, I think that all of the companies are being hit. I think TikTok is just the one that's hot right now.
Mhm. Okay, so the issue with TikTok is something that I find really interesting, and I will be having a lawyer on a subsequent episode. Very high profile guy. I'm super excited to talk about the constitutionality and the national security risk. The of a TikTok ban. And one of the things I heard him say on the Wall Street Journal was that in TikTok kind of appealing this ban and taking Congress to court, saying that this is violates their First Amendment rights, they also say, hey, we can't break up our company. The software code base is such that we can't fork it and just hand over the software code base to another country, to another entity to own. And I find that interesting, but here's a question, Drew McKay, you might know the answer or not, just let me know. If TikTok operates differently and under a different app name in China than it does in other countries, doesn't that mean there is a natural fork in the code base that can split the two apart? Like, if the algorithm is different and operates differently outside of China, doesn't that mean that the code base can be separated?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
That's fair.
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure, like when you start to think about that uh down to that level with code and regions. I'm not sure. I don't know that necessarily mean that it can be forked or it can't. I just don't know.
I don't know. We're having some technical difficulties. Maybe we're getting hacked, Drew McKay.
No,
So
I hope
I
not.
hope not.
The
Thank
engineer
you.
and the techie getting hacked. Ugh.
Oh no, so embarrassing. Take us and our reputations out. So
Right.
thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabus, and my guest, Drew McKay Dada. We hope you enjoyed our take on Cybersecurity 101 and all of the things that we each can do to protect our digital identities. Drew McKay, where can people find you?
Pause. Pause right now because there's something passing. But you can pause right there. 1 second. There's, I don't know if you can hear the
I can hear the
thing.
train.
Okay, so we'll pause it right there and then I'll answer.
I'm glad this is with you and not someone.
I know, I got your back. I get it. It's almost done. But that was a good break. That's a
All
good
right.
break. All right, here we go.
Where can people find you online?
Well, I'm everywhere. As Drew McKay Dollar, just first and last name. So feel free to connect and LinkedIn. So I'm
LinkedIn
private.
specific.
Yeah, LinkedIn specifically, that'll probably be best. And but yep, you can follow along on some social platforms as well.
Awesome. As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. Final note, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, of course, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits on YouTube. Hit subscribe, and for audio only, follow wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Drew McKay, for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope we get to do this again soon.
100%.